Wade Wilson, better known as the Deadpool Killer because of his name, has admitted to brutally murdering 2 women in Florida. He confessed to killing one woman inside her home and then wrapping her body up in bed sheets, and another was choked and then run over with a car by him. This week on Two Crime Newsies, we dive deep into the world of mayhem and hear from a woman who could have been his 3rd victim. Hey everyone, I'm Jen. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Tina.
How are you doing, my friend?
I'm not bad. How are you?
You're not bad? You're chipper?
No, I wouldn't say chipper. Because we just got done recording the last part.
Yes.
So, but I am trying to put myself in a better headspace because I don't want to end up with another headache.
No. Tina and I are sitting here with our coffees, and my goodness, what an episode we have in store for you. Before we dive into that, though, and speaking of coffee, we want to thank all of you who have donated to our coffee fund. It really helps us keep these episodes coming to you every single week.
Yes, and if you want to donate to our coffee fund, you can certainly do that at buymeacoffee.com/2crimenewsies, or you can go to 2crimenewsies.com and there's a link to Buy Me a Coffee right there on our homepage.
The beautiful website that Tina designed for us.
Thank you much.
All right, before we get to the mayhem that surrounds Wade Wilson, I want to say this episode is not for those who are faint of heart, not for children, and not for those who are squeamish. Tina, this episode is not for you.
I agree.
Just kidding. You're stuck with dealing with it and recording with it.
You are holding me hostage here.
But truthfully, a listener warning is again needed this week.
I agree. This was 3 episodes of pure evil, and then watching people lust after this creature made it even more disgusting. Ugh. It was such a hard watch, but also, like I mentioned in the other episode, eye-opening. It's hard to believe there are people in this world this vile, but here they are.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about both Wilson and the women throwing themselves at him.
If you didn't listen to last week's episode, part 1, I suggest you give it a listen before you listen to this one, because otherwise some of the things that we're going to talk about are not going to make too much sense. There's a lot of information that's pretty crucial to this week's episode.
This is fact. I know firsthand because if you recall, Jen, when I started watching this show, I accidentally clicked on episode 3.
And you called me
instead of episode 1, and I had to call Jen for help because I was so lost. So don't do that.
Listener tidbit.
Right. Now, to give a quick recap, episode 1 is where we meet Wade Wilson. And yes, that is his real name.
Scumbag.
Correct. Wade is 25 when he begins a brutal crime spree in the Cape Coral and Fort Myers area of Florida in 2019. Though we learned from one of his girlfriends that his criminal record started long before that, as he was in and out of jail most of his life. Though never for murder until 2019. That's when he choked and murdered Christine Melton in her home and killed a young wife and mother, Diane Ruiz, by purposefully driving a car over her several times. We hear him confess to these killings in the first episode. Oh, and in between those killings, he also assaults his girlfriend.
He beat her up.
He did. Thankfully, she survives. But 2 women have been killed by Wilson. And he also admits to using his, quote, charm and good looks to lure them into his car before taking their lives.
And he did all this within a span of 12
hours? 3, I think.
Yeah, it was a very short period of time.
We also hear him talk about how drugs affect him. They fill him with rage, he says, and how they turn him into the devil. By the end of episode 1, Wilson is in jail awaiting trial after his father tips off police to his location. We also get a peek at the relationship between Wilson and his father towards the end of the episode, and I think that's fascinating because Wilson's father seems like a proper human who knows the difference between right and wrong and clearly expresses his disgust and sorrow for what his son did. And we see him wrestle with that, of how he loves his son, but also how he knows that the right thing to do was to turn him in. And that's how we leave episode 1.
Okay, with that being said, let's dive into episode 2 and 3 of Handsome Devil Charming Killer, which we watched on Paramount Plus. These 2 episodes focus a lot on the female attention that Wade Wilson received from women worldwide following his arrest. But truthfully, I don't want to talk too much about that. There are 2 women we're going to mention throughout this episode because both played a pretty big role in his trial. But for all the women around the world who became obsessed with this killer, I really don't want to talk about them all that much.
Same.
The show coins these women as Wade's wives. And to be completely frank, I don't understand it. I don't understand the attraction. I don't understand the want of approval from a self-proclaimed killer. I just don't get it.
I think as a woman, supporting a man who admits to killing other women is diabolical.
When I was watching this show, it reminded me a lot of a guy who I worked with at the TV station early on in my career. He was a totally normal guy, had a good job, had lots of women who were not incarcerated. I'm just going to be honest. Like, he had a lot of women who were not incarcerated who were interested in him. Overall, he was a really good guy. Well, totally randomly, one day, he told me that he would write to women who were in prison. It just like random conversation. Jen, I got this letter from this woman in prison. I was like, what?
Maybe this happens in other industries, but for some reason, I feel like TV stations are so full of characters and the most random stories come out of people's mouths.
Oh, yeah. When my coworker told me this, I remember immediately asking him why. And I never got an exact answer from him about why he would write to women in prison. He and I were both fairly new in the industry, and this was when I was working the morning show. So for the most part, it was just the 2 of us in the building. And one morning, he brought in some of the letters from these women who would write him.
That's amazing.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up, Tina. Let me just tell you, Tina, it was fascinating. I'll never forget. I remember he let me read one letter from a woman who was in prison somewhere in the Four Corners states who was incarcerated for stealing cars. And I remember talking to him about it and comparing this woman and her crime spree. Yes, literally. She had gone on a crime spree like Grand Theft Auto, and she stole a whole bunch of cars. And in these letters to my coworker, it almost sounded like she was trying to seduce him. Like, hey, baby, let me tell you about these cars I boosted. Truly. And that, my friends out there, was my best impressions of Elvis Presley. I even did this little lip thing for you.
She doesn't do great impressions, but she does do excellent sound effects. Like that one. That's the whale.
It was just so bizarre, Tina. I don't understand it, because he also wrote to some women who had murdered people. I just didn't get it. I don't get it.
Wow. I've definitely heard of women writing to men behind bars, but I had no idea there were also men who were not in prison writing to women in prison. No one ever talks about that.
No, but I have seen it firsthand because I got to read some of these letters. Wow.
I want to know how he found these pen pals. How in the world did he find Grand Theft Auto Amy? And decide that that's the one he's going to write to?
I mean, one of many.
How did he get her fan mail address? I have so many questions. Mm-hmm. Did he not go into this?
No.
I'm assuming you were so shocked by this, you didn't come up with these questions.
I mean, I worked in TV, so we know I have questions. I have questions about everything. Let's be real.
Maybe sometimes you don't ask the questions because you don't want to know the answer.
I mean, normally I want to know the answer, regardless of what the answer is going to be.
I don't know. Listen, if I'm working with this guy and it's 3 a.m. and we're the only ones in the building and he seems kind of like a strangey, I don't know if I want to know the answers to all the questions.
I'll leave you here in this editing bay by yourself.
Be over here where the windows are and people can maybe see me.
Yeah. I'm going to go stand in front of a camera and just hope that
There's
somebody
some
will
record
Yeah.
of what happened here. If you have ever done this, you know,
Prison pen pal.
prison pen pal, or say you're a lawyer and you know how this works, please let us know. I'm so curious.
Tina
How do
has
people
lots of
find these
questions.
people? Yeah.
So I randomly, since we started doing a true crime podcast, I'll have like on my Instagram, you know, they like pop up like videos randomly. I want to say it happened once or twice where it like pops up and there's in certain states, like inmates are allowed to like video record themselves. Like, hey, I'm so-and-so from Idaho, and I steal cars in my free
Stop
time.
it.
Yes, you can write to me. I'm at such and such correctional facility. My
That's
number is
on your
da-da-da-da-da.
Instagram?
It came up like once or twice.
Jen, what's wrong with your algorithm?
It started after we started doing the true crime podcast.
I mean, I've been doing true crime progress. I haven't seen that crap in my algorithm.
Your algorithm is probably like puppies and t-shirts.
It is absolutely puppies. 100%. I just saw the cutest one the other day.
Oh my gosh, you would. Meanwhile, mine is like gothic stuff and Dracula and
Prison inmates.
apparently so. I feel like the algorithm recognized that I didn't want that because I've never seen it again. I think it's how quickly I swiped away from it.
I see. I got to discover that hashtag for funsies. It's like not prison talk, right? Because that would be TikTok. If it's on Instagram, is it like prisongram?
Maybe.
Hashtag prisongram.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so let's get to Wade Wilson. He was indicted on 2 first-degree murder charges, and then while he was in jail waiting for his trial to begin, he started to get face tattooed. We had touched on it in the first episode that Wilson had lots of tattoos on his arms and torso, but while awaiting trial, we hear and we see videos of his facial tattoos. He has a swastika tattooed on his face near his right eye, and then also had the Joker-style stitch smile tattooed on his face. He also had "Why so serious? Ha ha ha" tattooed above his eye in reference to the Joker character from the movie The Dark Knight. Also, around that Joker smile on the side of his face, he had shading that looked like a partial skeleton. It was creepy. Needless to say, the added tattoos seemed to give Wilson even more street cred with the so-called Wade wives around the world. And this, again, in my opinion, but his facial tattoos are creepy. And he got them in prison, Tina, which I feel like is probably not very sanitary.
Spot on, Jen. Unsanitary indeed.
I mean, I'm all for my hand sanitizer. I bet those things were not getting sanitized.
No, how did his face just not welt up in some sort of infection?
Ouch.
Also, I agree. The facial tattoos, these ones in particular, are extremely creepy. And we hear on the show that some potential jurors had to be excused because they were too freaked out to be in the same room with him. And I think the lesson here is you want to win over the jury, not scare them off. I don't know what this guy was thinking.
We know you're going to end up in prison because you've already said you did it, right? You said not just once, but you did it twice, and you've admitted to it. Why not wait until you're in prison to get these tattoos?
Well, he did. He got them in prison.
No, he got them in jail.
Okay, my bad.
There's a big difference between
Behind
prison and
bars.
jail.
You mean why did he get them post-trial instead of pre-trial? That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, no. Mm-mm. Okay. We hear from his defense attorney on the show. His name is Lee Hollander, who says as soon as he met Wilson, he told him that he was in fact Jewish and asked Wilson if he had a problem with that, given his swastika tattoo. And apparently Wilson didn't have an issue with it because Hollander ended up being his attorney throughout. At this point in the show, we flash back to Wilson in jail, and we hear that he made thousands upon thousands of calls. Constantly, we hear, to women. And we see so many videos of Wilson on the phone with women. And some of them were having some very explicit conversations, definitely of the mature audience rating for sure.
We hear a great line from Sarah Miller, assistant state attorney, and she says, "It's hard as a woman to imagine attraction to someone who violently killed other women."
I agree with you.
Same, Sarah. Mila, Wilson's girlfriend at the time, is on screen, and we met her in the first episode. She's the one that he assaulted in between killing 2 other women. She's still talking to him while he's in jail.
What are you doing, Mila?
Come
on, Mila.
We hear one of their conversations where Mila asked why he killed Christine, and he says he shouldn't have done it. And she presses him by asking again why he did it. And he says because he wanted to, and then says it was because he was on drugs.
At this point, Mila asks Wilson why did he end up killing Diane Ruiz after he had already killed Christine Melton. And that's when Wilson tells her on the phone, "I killed her after I saw you." And he goes on to tell Mila on the recorded call, "I choked her out, pushed her out of the car, and then I ran her over with the car like 10 times.
Mila sounds disturbed listening to this, and she asks Wilson, "Do you hear yourself?" And he says yes, and then says he was on drugs when it happened. Mila says there are a lot of people on drugs who don't kill people. I agree.
Yep.
And she says it's not normal. And it sounds like he laughs here when he says, "Okay, I get it."
It's like that sinister laugh.
Mila says she was hoping to hear him have genuine remorse for what he did. But she says when he did say he was sorry, it was to her for him being in jail. Next, we hear from Alexis Williams, another girlfriend of Wilson. This one he met when he was already in jail. Alexis says she thought he was innocent because he told her he was, and said his confession was set up. So Alexis showed up to court to support him.
I'm giving Tina a look right now.
Ooh, don't give that one to me. I didn't do it. Also, I have to mention there are a lot of recorded conversations between Wilson and these women that we hear throughout the show, and they are disturbing to listen to. You can hear Wilson make excuses for what he did, and you can hear some of these women enabling his excuses.
It was
and
disgusting.
And his behavior. It's sad. It's frustrating to listen to, and there is very little to zero compassion for the lives lost.
Okay, to the trial. Wilson's trial for 2 counts of first-degree murder, battery, and grand theft of a motor vehicle started on June 1st, 2024. And needless to say, the courtroom was packed. Wilson walked into the room, and I think immediately he was trying to make a statement in his flashy outfit. He had on this bright blue jacket, a yellow tie, a black shirt, and for most of the world, this was the first time that we saw his face covered in those tattoos.
We learned that Wilson's attorneys during trial were the 5th set of attorneys on the case.
He's going through them like he's changing out his socks.
Yep. We hear one of them say, "We weren't smart enough to step back when they called for volunteers." We also learned there was an attempt to cover up his tattoos with makeup before the trial, but the makeup didn't work. The tattoos were still visible, so that plan went out the window, and he walked in, tattoos and all.
I don't understand why he would want to cover them up. Why did you get them? You know what I'm saying? Why did you get them in jail?
I'm assuming he got them in jail because he doesn't seem to make the greatest decisions, right? He doesn't
Obviously.
have a very good decision maker brain. So he gets them, and the attorneys are saying, no, we got to cover those up. It'll help, but they couldn't.
It's not going to help.
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. Oh gosh, this whole thing is just ridiculous.
The trial started with the jury seeing pictures of Christine holding her cat, and then we see pictures of her house where she has been found. We then see crime scene pictures. We hear from the prosecutor that Christine's face was black and blue and her fingernails had been broken. We're told she also had marks around her neck. The prosecutors then told the jury about 43-year-old Diane Ruiz, who had been found in an empty lot amongst some shrubs. We hear her nose had been broken, her hyoid bone and her thyroid cartilage had been broken. And you may remember we talked in a couple of episodes about a broken hyoid. And the hyoid, if you don't remember, is a very small bone in your neck. And if it's broken, it often means forensically that the person has been strangled to death. And this next part, Tina, cover your ears. The prosecutor goes on to say that Diane had multiple rib fractures, and this is when he reminds the jury that Wilson had told law enforcement that he had driven over her repeatedly. And there's something else that he says that's absolutely disgusting about what Diane's body looked like at the end, and I'm not even going to say it. I don't know if you caught this, Tina, but I paused the show right after the prosecutor had said this and the camera had panned to Wilson. And the officer who is sitting right behind Wilson in the courtroom's eyes are so wide. He looked absolutely shocked. He then looked at Wilson, whose back is towards him, and then he pans to the audience almost like he's seeking validation from everyone and is saying with his eyes only, "Did you guys hear what I just heard?"
I did see that. Assistant State Attorney Sarah Miller says Wilson was smirking and staring down jury members in court.
I want to slap him in the face.
She also says one juror cried during jury selection and a few were excused out of sheer terror of being near him in the courtroom.
We hear a very telling line from Wilson's defense attorney. He tells us there's only so much you can do with this case. Usually when you have an opening, you like to have a solid defense or something in your favor. But at that point, we were still tiptoeing through the tulips trying to come up with one. This is Wilson's defense attorney saying this.
Yep.
Meaning they did not have an actual strategy of how they wanted to defend him.
How could you?
And this is when something truly shocking happens in court. The defense attorney reserved judgment, meaning the defense attorney waived his opening statement. Again, meaning the defense attorney didn't give an opening statement to which the judge literally is heard saying, "Okay," and the first witness was called immediately.
Nothing from the defense. Jen, can you imagine how good that must feel in court when that happens? It's like when you're debating with someone and they don't have a comeback, so they don't say anything at all and it feels like you won. You just completely shut them down.
You just got super giddy about that.
Uh-huh. So the prosecutors get to call their first witness, and it's Mila Montanez, Wilson's girlfriend at the time of the murders. This episode is sponsored by Jake Tatum, top producing mortgage lender with the Wood Group of Fairway Independent Mortgage Corporation. Let's be honest, the mortgage world has plenty of mystery.
Rates are changing, fine print is hiding in the shadows, and everyone online is claiming they've cracked the secret code.
That's where Jake comes in. He follows the evidence, breaks down the facts, and makes sure your deal doesn't turn into a financial cold case. Whether you're buying, refinancing, pulling cash out, or investing, Jake handles all loan types and builds the right strategy for your situation.
And he also specializes in VA loans, making sure our veterans get every benefit they've earned. No missing details, no bad surprises.
So if your current loan feels a little suspicious, it might be time for a second opinion.
Start the investigation at TatumHomeLoans.com. That's TatumHomeLoans.com.
Mila says when first asked to testify against Wilson, she said she couldn't do it. She couldn't sit across from him in court and do it. But then she says they told her she would be the only voice for Christine and Diane because she was the only one that he attacked and she survived, and the only person who could convey just how scary he can be. Mila says something interesting here. She says that she could imagine him killing her, but not two random women. And she says she feels guilty about it. And I think she means she feels guilty for surviving when they died.
Yep. We see Mila be sworn in and walk up to the stand. And let's talk about Mila for a second. She's a tiny lady with blonde hair, which is braided for court that day. She's wearing a black suit and a black shirt underneath. Seeing her take her seat on the stand, you can see how absolutely nervous she is. I feel like she's trembling. She's sitting stick straight and she's got her eyes right on the Assistant State Attorney, Sarah Miller. It honestly looked like she was preparing herself for war.
Mila says she was hyperventilating. It was hard to breathe when she was doing this, and she said she thought at one point she was going to pass out. She talks about crying before even stepping foot in court and how she ruined her hair and her makeup from crying. And you can definitely see what she means when they give us a close-up shot of her on the stand. She's not wearing much makeup, her eyes are a little puffy, and she has some strands of hair out of place, almost like she had to throw it up and back really quickly. Regardless, she's beautiful, but you can see she probably wasn't exaggerating about how upset she was before entering the court.
Prosecutor Miller asked Mila about the morning of October 7th, 2019, when Wilson came to her spa driving someone else's car, which turned out to be Christine Melton's, and attacked Mila. Mila tells the packed courtroom the attack was violent, aggressive, and she thought she was going to die. Mila says she was trying to reason with Wilson during the attack, but couldn't because she said there was nothing behind Wilson's eyes anymore. Later, the defense attorney would ask Mila about Wade Wilson's dark eyes that morning, and she told the court his eyes looked like dark serial killer eyes. Mila goes on to say, where there is nothing to reason with, where there's black holes, where you're saying words, where you're trying to evoke emotions in somebody, and there's nothing behind those eyes. Mila continued to tell the prosecutor that the final punch she remembered is when Wilson punched her in the nose, and she says blood went crazy everywhere. And she says when that happened, there was a minute where she was able to duck under his arms and she ran down the stairs. And that's when her neighboring business called her. And Mila goes on to say they rescued her. Mila is asked to identify the person who attacked her, and she looks right at Wilson, who would not face her. Tina, did you notice that? Mm-hmm. He was looking anywhere in the court besides at Mila. He was looking at his attorney. He was looking out in the audience. He was looking everywhere, anywhere besides her.
That is what it looks like, although I'm assuming the editors are using the exact footage of what was happening there in court and not taking sound and video from two different periods and putting them together. We see Mila answer some questions from the defense attorney, and we hear her admit to using cocaine that she got from Wilson the night before the murders, and she talks about how there's nothing behind Wilson's eyes, saying, again, he had dark serial killer eyes the day that she saw him, the day of the murders. And she's answering every question with strength and confidence, and she doesn't appear to be fearful or fragile. Assistant State Attorney Andreas Gardner says Mila took cross-examination like a palm tree in a hurricane.
I love that. A palm tree in a hurricane. That's right. Way to go, Mila. She walked out of that courtroom and passed Wilson standing tall, but Mila says she immediately faced death threats and hate.
Mila says she couldn't go to work for several months after the trial. People were sending her threats for testifying against Wilson, and it's unbelievable how awful people can be. Mila says she had no idea she had to defend herself from hundreds of thousands of girls who were defending a serial killer. We see reels that were circulating on social media and TikTok around this time, and we hear that Wilson knew all about the social media chatter surrounding him and was well aware of the women who were talking about him online. Someone in the show compares it to Charles Manson's cult following, how people and women were getting tattoos like Wilson's. And then we see Alexis, one of Wilson's girlfriends who was showing up to court to support him. And she shows the Wade Wilson tattoo that she got on her wrist. Alexis says she doesn't have any other names on her body, not even her own children's names, but she has his now.
I find this absolutely absurd. All these women worldwide sending him money and pictures and stuff. I don't get it. And honestly, I don't even want to talk about it anymore. We've talked about that ridiculousness enough, in my opinion, Tina. Back to the trial of this scumbag. The prosecutor in the case tells us that every time he looked over at Wilson during the trial, he seemed to be enjoying listening to everything they had to present to the jury. He says that you're dealing with somebody absolutely sick who has taken depravity to a whole other level.
Speaking of sick, I know you don't want to talk about this anymore, but I just have to bring this up. Casey Jordan is a criminologist, an attorney, and a behavior analyst, and she says something that helps me understand a tiny bit of what's happening here.
All right, let's hear it.
It's going to sound strange because she starts by saying there's a sense of safety and control in loving a bad boy. Look, did you roll your eyes? She goes on to explain the rationale behind this by saying, here is a violent person, I'm controlling him, and he can't hurt me.
But he's calling hundreds of other women.
Right. I don't think they know this. That's the problem. I'm also assuming she means he can't hurt me because he's in jail, or I wonder if this means he won't hurt me because he says he loves me. What do you think?
I think they're crazy.
Oh yeah, I agree. We also learned that Wilson kept a bunch of pictures on the wall of his jail cell. One of those pictures is the field where they found Diana Ruiz.
Disgusting.
Casey Jordan says this picture isn't just a memento. Having this picture up, she says, is him reliving the murder. It's awful.
That's terrible. During the trial, we hear from Diane Ruiz's fiance, as well as Christine Melton's best friend. Stephanie Johnson, Christine's best friend, says that she was with Christine on October 6, 2019, when the duo met Wilson at the Buddha Bar in Fort Myers. She says the three ended up leaving the bar and going back to Christine's home. And around 5 in the morning, she said she left Christine and Wilson together at Christine's.
So we hear a phone conversation right now between Wilson and one of the girls, Alexis, maybe?
Yep.
It doesn't say. This is right after Wilson receives paperwork that tells him the state is going to seek the death penalty in the trial. He doesn't seem to have a lot of reaction to getting that paperwork. We hear him say, it's serious and it sucks. But he seems to get more animated talking about how mad he is at one of the officers at the jail because the officer told him, I heard about the good news, referring to Wilson facing the death penalty.
And this is when we see Wilson's dad, Steve, walk into the courtroom. Steve says he was 14 or 15 when he found out he was going to be a father. And this is when we hear that Wilson had been put up for adoption when he was a baby.
And remember, at this point, the prosecutor is seeking the death penalty. The prosecutor says even though this was his son, Steve was set on doing the right thing and didn't give them any pushback about getting on the stand and talking about what Wilson told him about the murders. And I think what he does here is so admirable.
I agree.
He's putting what happened to these women as the highest priority here, not him as a father and not Wilson as his son. And I think this is admirable because I feel like we live in an age where people will go to the ends of the earth to defend their children, even when they do horrific things. And we see and read family statements from murder suspects all the time on social media. And I guess I don't understand it because I don't have children. But I think it gives me hope to see a parent here prioritize doing the right thing for others and for society over their child who committed these awful crimes.
Wilson's dad, Steve, says that on October 7th, 2019, he got a call from his son. And during that call, Wilson told him he had done something and that there had been 2 people gone that would never come back. Steve says his son told him that he was in fact a killer and that he choked that, and I'm going to say beep because I don't feel like saying it. And I need to make mention here, during all this, while Steve is talking about this and telling us about this, you can see the turmoil on his face. He's testifying against his son. His testimony will likely make a giant impact on the jury and will likely help seal his son's fate. But he continues on. You can see the absolute turmoil in him as he sits on that witness stand and his son stares at him with a blank look on his face.
The prosecutor asks Steve what Wilson's demeanor was like when he was talking to him about the murders, and Steve says Wilson was excited and proud of what he did. When asked if Wilson showed any kind of remorse, Steve says no, he didn't. When asked if Steve had concerns about not turning him into law enforcement, Steve says yes, he was concerned Wilson would do it again. We hear from one of the 12 jurors, and he says Steve's testimony was very impactful and that he did the right thing.
I completely agree that he did the right thing. The show says that Steve Wilson's father got tremendous amounts of hate from people online, and we see some of these messages and they're disturbing. But I just want to say the courage to stand up and turn your son in to protect more women, like Tina had mentioned, it's admirable because I'm pretty sure there would have probably been more. It really takes a big person to do that. And I just want to say thank you, Steve, for making that phone call to police. At this point in the trial, the judge asked if Wilson himself wanted to testify in his own defense, and he told the judge he did not want to. Tina, why do you think he did that?
If you don't have anything nice to say, you shouldn't say anything at all. And I don't think he had anything good or nice to say, to be honest.
Yeah.
Lee Hollander, one of Wilson's defense attorneys, says the prosecution would have cross-examined the heck out of Wilson, so it was best to keep him off the stand. We also hear from Alexis, one of the girlfriends, and she says there was nothing he could say to justify what he did. And I think that's really what it comes down to. We see Alexis at this point after sitting in the courtroom, seeing the evidence, and listening to the witnesses, and she really seems to understand now that the wool was pulled over her eyes, and it looks like she has finally seen the light, that this is a bad dude. Thank goodness.
Both cases rested at this point, and the prosecutor walked the jury one more time through the cases against Christine Melton, Mila Montanez, and Diane Ruiz. Then it was the defense attorney's turn, and he argued for second-degree murder because he says it is not eligible for the death penalty.
Defense attorney Lee Hollander says he's not arguing that Wilson didn't do it, and he's not arguing insanity. Instead, he says the state is claiming premeditation, but he's whacked out of his mind for any of this, is what Hollander is arguing. Now, I was left a little confused after hearing this, because being whacked out, like he said, sounds to me like an insanity defense, right?
I feel like if your attorney is saying you are whacked out, like that means you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
So I went to Google and I asked why Lee Hollander didn't pursue an insanity defense in the Wade Wilson case. And here's what Google AI gave me, and I think it's a pretty good explanation.
Let's hear it.
It says, defense attorney Lee Hollander did not argue insanity in the Wade Wilson case because his strategy focused on denying the premeditation element of first-degree murder rather than arguing that Wilson was legally insane. Instead of a formal insanity defense, Hollander pursued a strategy of diminished capacity, or attempting to convince the jury that the murders were not planned, hoping to secure a conviction of second-degree murder and avoid the death penalty. It goes on to say that Hollander was arguing that Wilson was whacked out on drugs and not thinking clearly.
Apparently he's not trampling through the tulips anymore, like he said at the beginning.
Right.
Then the case went to the jury. Wilson was found guilty for the first-degree murder of Christine Melton. He was also found guilty of first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz. And in the penalty phase, we hear about Wilson's childhood. We hear he was adopted by a family in Tallahassee. We hear from his adoptive mother on the show, who truthfully sounded like she had been smitten with him.
Candy Wilson is his adoptive mother, and Candy says Wilson was cute as a dumpling, and the family fell head over heels for him. She says growing up, he was a happy kid and a good kid. However, Candy says when Wilson was in his teens, around 15 or 16, he received a letter from his biological mom, and that's when she noticed what she calls an identity crisis.
We later hear from Wilson's adopted mom that he was diagnosed as bipolar when he was a teen and was at first good about taking his medications, but as he got older, he stopped taking them. At this point, though, we also hear that there was no medical records of this bipolar diagnosis. The prosecutor states that Wilson was in and out of jail prior to the murder case for battery of women, drug charges, domestic violence, burglary arrests, and the defense, meanwhile, said that he was impaired the night of the murder by drugs, and that's what caused him to be a ticking time bomb. During the sentencing phase, we hear from Diane Ruiz's son, and it was heartbreaking. He talks about his mom and him him waiting for her to come home, and it was devastating to watch.
Zane is on the stand and he tells the courtroom that he was 14 when his mom Diane died and he is her youngest child. He says he had just started high school and his mom was excited to see him grow up. And he says he nearly took his own life because of the pain of losing his mom.
We also hear from Christine Melton's cousin, who was also her best friend. She talks about how much her kids love Christine and how devastated they are. At one point, a picture is shown of Christine, and Wilson tries not to look at the photo. Did you see that?
I did.
And Christine's cousin says, look at her, very sternly. And the camera goes back to Wilson, and he looks around awkwardly, and he looks very uncomfortable being confronted. Christine's cousin here has a very pointed line that we hear on the show. She says, the prosecution has won this trial, but the family and friends and loved ones of Christine Melton have only lost.
We learned a jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, and Wilson was sentenced to death. We learned that in Christine Melton's case, the jury vote for the death penalty recommendation was 9-3, and for Diane Ruiz, the jury vote for the death penalty was 10-2. We also learned that Florida doesn't require a unanimous jury, but they do need at least 8 jurors to agree. We do see a graphic at the end of the show that says Wade Wilson's lawyers have filed an appeal of his death sentence, and then it says the process will take years.
So, where's Wade Wilson now? Right where he belongs. Wade Wilson is on death row at Union Correctional Institution in Florida, and apparently he's living the high life in prison. Tina, listen to this nonsense. We see on the show that Wade Wilson has received more than $92,000. $92,000. That's a whole bunch of money from people, mainly women around the world, through crowdfunding. And we hear that he uses this money for commissary, meaning he's buying snacks for himself while he's in prison. What nonsense!
This truly makes my heart hurt for humanity. I'll never understand what these women are thinking, and all I can hope for is that they watch this documentary, and surely they will if they're obsessed with this man. So hopefully they'll watch and they'll see the light.
What an absolutely heartbreaking story.
It really is. We've lost 2 lovely women to darkness and evil. And for what? For being too trusting? And it's not their fault.
Nope.
Because I don't want to go around telling people not to trust others. No one wants to live in fear like that. I think the best we can do is remember this story and remember that there are people filled with darkness in this world who aim to harm, like this man. And there are people filled with light, like Christine and Diane, and we can only hope that our intuition will lead us away from danger.
Wow, Tina, well said.
It's true.
My friend, the poet over here. And these women, these truly incredible women, I want to remember the victims. I want our listeners to remember them. Mila Montanez's life will never be the same. She still struggles with guilt. I feel like she has this survivor's guilt, and it's heartbreaking to hear because she survived. She should be proud that she survived.
I agree. Mila showed a lot of emotion at the end when she said she felt a sense of relief for the families of Christine and Diane when Wilson received the death penalty. And I think, Jen, she should also feel a sense of relief for herself because a monster that she physically battled is no longer able to destroy her life, and I really do hope that she can find peace.
I hope so too. We also remember Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. We remember them now and in the future. Their lives mattered. They were moms, they were daughters, they were full life, and in one instant, their lives and all of their loved ones' lives were turned upside down. Christine Melton, Diane Ruiz will not be forgotten. And with that, I want to close out our show. Say thank you for listening to our episode this week, and we will talk to you again next week.